Hey everyone, my name is Amit Matani. I'm the CEO here at Wellfound. Now, Wellfound is a job marketplace that focuses on startup hiring and remote hiring. So we have candidates that are looking for jobs at startups or remote companies, technology companies in particular, as well as companies that are looking to hire startup and remote talent. So on the candidate side, we offer a job board that gives you a lot more information up front in terms of the companies that you're going to apply for. Specifically, if you're looking for a remote job, you'll see information like, if the job is remote only or remote possible. You also see kind of salary and equity information up front for a lot of the jobs. On the company side, we essentially offer a recruiting system in a box for free for startups and remote teams. So everything from posting your job, creating a career site, managing inbound applicants, and even sourcing candidates that might not yet be interested in your opportunity. We also offer an applicant tracking system that manages the candidates up until hire for free. The cool thing for remote, especially, is that we offer a lot of information about candidates upfront about their remote preferences, from where they're located to what type of work are they interested in. You can see this on a profile where we show on-site or remote preference. You can see the remote office preferences here that people can search on. Now, all this works because we ask both sides a lot of information about how they do remote work and what they want. So in this form, for example, you can see what remote policies are for the job, the hiring locations for remote work, as well as you can see what the company's remote culture is and time zones and collaboration hours for remote workers. And the cool thing here is not only does this lead to better matches for remote candidates, but we also get a really cool insight into what the remote hiring market looks like right now. So using our data, I'm going to show you kind of what the hiring market looks like right now and how it's changed over the last few years for remote work. This is a chart of companies that are posting at least one remote job. And as you can see, in 2019, we had about 30%, a little less than that, 30% of companies that posted jobs on our platform in the United States posted a remote job. And you can see in 2020, that really changed. When the pandemic hit, a lot of companies were forced to go remote, and a lot of it stuck, right? And we saw that. So once the pandemic hit, after the pandemic hit, we had about 60% of companies posting remote jobs at a given point. But we've seen a little bit of a decrease over the last year or so. It's gone down to about 50% of companies posting remote jobs. So one interesting takeaway, though, from looking at the data is we ask companies, are they mostly remote or fully remote, or do they just accept remote workers? And before the pandemic, about 50% of companies were like on-site primarily, but accepted remote workers. And that really shifted, and it hasn't really changed. So now, if you're hiring remotely, you're primarily a mostly remote or fully remote company, and that hasn't shifted all that much over the last few years. Now, while companies' interest in remote work has declined slightly over the last few years, candidate interest in remote work is still close to its all-time high. So even before the pandemic, we had about 40 to 50% of our candidates applied to a remote job in a given month that were applying to jobs. And post-pandemic, that's shifted all the way up to 80%. So candidates really, really want to work remotely and generally apply to remote work jobs at a higher rate. And you can see that candidate interest in remote work play out in these charts. This chart. This shows the number of average applicants per job by type, either remote or not remote. So even before the pandemic, if you had a remote job, you'd get on average 20 applications for that remote job, whereas a non-remote job, an on-site job, got about 10. Now, that comes from interest, but also a larger talent pool, right? So if you have an on-site job, you're basically bounded by the people that are in your location or willing to move to your location, whereas remote jobs are open to almost anybody in the entire world. And as the job market has gotten a lot more constricted over the last few years, we've seen the average number of job applications for remote jobs go up considerably. Now, a remote job can get anywhere between 30 and 40 applications, while an on-site job is still down to around 10. And so the market is really favoring companies right now. And frankly, it's pretty tough on the candidate side to get a remote job. So now I want to talk a little bit about how to hire if you're hiring remotely, as well as talk about how to find a remote job. First, we'll talk about how to hire remotely. So, as I mentioned before, the market is very much in favor of companies that are hiring remotely. Now, for two reasons. First off, the job market is just more constricted overall. But the other one is, again, there's a lot more interest in remote jobs than there are on site jobs. And I think as a company that hires remotely, Wellfound is a company that hires remotely, we think it's the best way of really expanding your talent pool to get the best possible fit and not be constricted by your local geography. So, how do you do it? I think there's three pieces. And number one is figuring out your work style. So, figuring out how your company works, obviously, finding talent and then hiring talent. So, what's your work style? So, why is this important? I think one of the biggest problems companies have when hiring remotely is they don't know how they work because it's a huge impact on how they can hire and who they can hire. And so, what is work style here? Well, work style is synchronous versus asynchronous, how you guys communicate as a company. And realistically, there's no wrong way, it just changes the way you have to operate. So asynchronous work styles are basically document first, asynchronous video first. Your collaboration usually happens over text or video. And the benefit of that is it's pretty flexible and it allows you to hire people in different time zones. You're not really focused on just hiring people in your local time zone. You can get people ahead, many hours ahead potentially on the other side of the world. Again, that really helps as a company to be able to increase your talent pool, but it isn't for everyone. It requires a lot more work, a lot more thinking on how to work, and your feedback loops tend not to be as fast. If you're waiting for somebody a few hours away, it's really hard to get direct responses on something right away. Now, companies do mess around with this by having like core working hours, so 3 to 4 hours a day where everybody has to be online, so you can do that synchronous work. But generally, asynchronous companies tend to be more work but have more flexibility. On the other side, you have synchronous companies. These are companies that focus primarily on face to face meetings. The benefit here is the feedback loop's a lot faster, right? If you need something, you can ask somebody and they can get back to you pretty quickly. Um, but your problem here is that you just don't have the flexibility, especially with time zones. Generally, you'd want to hire somebody within the exact time zone that you're in, or maybe a couple hours either way. You don't want to be in this position where you're trying to constantly schedule meetings and it's becoming really, really difficult. It's also less work. Most companies and candidates know how to work synchronously. This is just how people have been working in the past. But honestly, this is probably the biggest decision that you can make when you're figuring out how to work, how you're going to hire remotely. So once you figure that out, you have to find talent. Basically, you have to go out and figure out where your talent's going to be. So when hiring remote workers, you should definitely use remote focused job boards. Like ours, Wellfound, but also others like Remote OK and We Work Remotely. There's a bunch more, and you should also use kind of the standard job boards like LinkedIn and Indeed or whatever. But the benefit of using remote focused job boards is you'll tend to have a better signal to noise ratio. The candidates will be more interested in remote. They'll usually have things like Wellfound does that explain the type of remote work you do, so you just get better matches. Now, the biggest thing with remote is being able to manage your inbound well. As we mentioned beforehand, you're going to get a lot more applicants than you would if you were hosting a job or posting an on site job. And you have to really be on top of managing the the amount of candidates that you'll get in. Um, and the big reason here is that even in this tight job market, the best candidates are the ones that you actually want to talk to might not be on the market long. So you don't want to make them wait. You want to move really, really quickly. What we've seen worked well here is really having a tight interview process, being able to move people through really quickly. And again, that goes back to your work style again. You want to make sure that if you have a synchronous work style, your interview process is synchronous focused. If you have an asynchronous style, I definitely still have synchronous interviews, but also would try to do some asynchronous stuff so you can actually test how this candidate's going to do in your type of work. I'd make sure also to respect the candidate's time. Don't spend a ton of time in this process. But again, the more you can learn up front, the better it is as you make the hire down the line. So next, I want to talk about how to get hired remotely. Um, It's going to be tougher now, right? There's just fewer jobs that are hiring remotely and fewer jobs in general, and there's more people that want remote jobs. But there are a few things that you can do to give yourself the best chance. So first off, I think it's figuring out how you want to work. As we talked about earlier, the asynchronous versus synchronous mode of working is different and each has its pros and cons. And I think you really need to know what type of work that you will thrive in. Some people do a lot better in meetings, some people do a lot better in a asynchronous documentation video focused culture. So I think it's a personal choice and you need to make that decision and then focus on the companies that you'll work really well with in that format. So there's a few things that you can do. The first one is just be early. We see this all the time with jobs on our platform that the earlier a candidate applies to a job, the better chance they have to actually getting hired. And this is just because that companies kind of set up interview loops. And once a bunch of people have gone through at the same time early on, they tend to find someone that they're interested. So being very early within that first week of job being posted is a good idea. And so being on a lot of different job boards and being on top of the new postings is going to be important. The other one is a little counterintuitive, but being late is also good. Generally, after a few waves of candidates, and if the company hasn't hired at that point, they might be open to a different type of candidate than they were before because they've learned basically what their process is like or what they're actually looking for. And you might have a better shot, down the line a month or two after the job has been posted. The issue with that is sometimes these jobs aren't, they've already been filled and the company hasn't pulled them down, but you might find some luck with it. The other piece is find a way to stand out. Again, as we mentioned earlier, some of these jobs get 50 applicants. I know some remote jobs will get 500 applicants on the first weekend. And, if you're a recruiter on the other side, you're looking for something to stand out, something to be interesting. Otherwise, the profiles kind of blend together. And generally, as a candidate, what you want to do is find things that relate to the job that help you stand out. Did you do something that was related to what they are looking for? I would focus on metrics. I'd focus on top companies that you worked at, top schools that you've gone to, anything that can give the recruiter, allow the recruiter to take a second look or encourage the recruiter to take a second look. The other one is follow up. And so, a lot of times people just apply to a job board and then move on. And that's fine. It works. We see a lot of people responding that way. But to really increase your chances, finding another way to follow up with the hiring manager really does help with the recruiter. Now, this won't work for like really large companies where you don't know who the recruiter or the hiring manager is. But for smaller companies, you can go online, figure out who's recruiting for the job, and potentially send a nice note on why you think you'd be a good fit. This won't work every time, but getting yourself out there does kind of help get a response. For the larger companies where you're not sure who to reach out to, trying to find a referral tends to work well in those ways. And the basic idea here is you just want the maximum number of opportunities to just get in front of the right person. So the final one is practice. I think interviewing is its own skill, and I think it's useful to try and practice a few times before you actually go in for an interview. Just because you'll be more fresh, you'll be able to kind of come up with answers more quickly and just give yourself the best shot of actually finding the job or getting the job. So, on top of talking about how to hire and how to get hired, I'm really excited to share some of the new things that we've been building here at Wellfound. So the first thing is something we're calling RecruiterCloud. So we realize that recruiting takes a lot of work. Finding candidates takes a lot of work. There's a lot of noise. And we wanted to make it really, really easy for you to find and connect with the right talent. So we've built a brand new sourcing tool that we're working in early access right now that makes it really easy to discover great talent and then actually reach out to them. So how does Recruiter Cloud work? Well, first off, it's really easy. You just tell us the type of candidate that you're looking for. And you can type in basically natural language to tell us what you're looking for. Another way to start this is basically just taking a job listing and just copying it over. I like doing this because it just makes things a lot easier. So you just take this whole listing, copy it, we'll just paste it here, and then you can get started. Now, what our AI does is it's pulls out the useful information to basically pre-generate your search filters for you. And you can see here, candidates, a software engineer looking for Python, React, SAS, nice to have, early stage growth phase, and a CS degree. So basically, it's pulled out a lot of the useful pieces of information from this job search in terms of what they wanted and created a search for you. So from there, we can just view the results. And, we can change some of these nice to haves to must haves just to make our results a little bit better. So, for example, I want to change, I want to have a must have around SaaS and I want to have a must have around early stage startup experience. So, from there, we get a list of candidates that might be a good fit. And the cool thing here is it shows you some information on why this candidate stands out and why they're really interesting. But if we really want to learn more, imagine working with a good recruiter that would tell you kind of the top things to learn about this candidate. And so, for example, for this one, like we really might want to care that has worked at a high growth SaaS company. We can add that in and we'll get this extra piece of feedback on every single profile. Oh, okay. So Sentry was a high growth SaaS company. It makes it really easy for you to figure out which candidate you want to reach out to. And so once we look into this candidate, we can also get all the things that we saw for the highlights, but we also see some highlights around the candidate's profile, how they fit the job the search that I was running. And the cool thing that I really, really like is getting more information about the company itself. Now, we hear this all the time from recruiters. They really want to understand what are the types of companies this candidate has worked for. So if you scroll over here, you actually get to see the type of company that they worked for. What did the company do? Who are the investors? When was the last funding? And basically give you some good context if this company was legit or is a good fit for or similar to your type of company. Now, if we're interested in this candidate, all we have to do is hit add to prospects. And this will add that candidate to a list of candidates that we can reach out. If we're not interested, we can hit snooze. And if we're not interested, we can hit hide. And if we want to make a decision later, we can hit snooze. And then from there, we can reach out to candidates via prospects. So we can click this candidate and we can see that we haven't set up an outreach sequence to reach out. So we can create one and we want to create one with AI help. It would be nice that I don't have to do all that work. So it just takes that description that you had before and then extracts out useful pieces of information to generate a pitch for the candidate. Now, we like to use specific categories for pitches to candidates, things that we know convert really well. So what does your company do? The momentum of your company, the team, why join, you will do, and some compensation location information. All of this stuff was actually just pulled from that copy paste that I just did. But if you wanted to make some changes, you could. So we are a fully remote team. I can add here. And then what it'll do, it'll create a set of messages to reach out to the candidate that I can send to them. And sometimes you might not want all of these messages, so you might want to delete one, but and you might want to change the way, you're setting your messages up. So once we've done that, we can actually go here and click send outreach to the candidate. And over some period of time, when they respond, we'll see the responses in our Gmail. And on top of that, now once you go to search, because I've created a outreach sequence, I can always just add to, I can automatically one-click send these outreach sequences to candidates. It just makes it really, really easy to, when you find a good fit candidate, to reach out to them quickly and really kind of get those responses that you want. And that's basically it. We think it's a pretty cool product. We've seen a lot of companies already try it out. If you're excited and want to try it out, you can always come to wellfound.com today and give it a shot. So the other product I want to talk about today is our next generation job search product. We're launching this into early access right now with a small set of early testers. But our basic idea here is that job searching kind of sucks. You have to go through countless jobs, apply to a ton of them. It takes a lot of work to do that. And oftentimes you don't even hear back. And our idea is trying to figure out how we can bring a personal career agent to everyone. And the basic premise here is that we'll find a bunch of great fit jobs for you. We'll create great applications and tailored resumes to apply for you on your behalf. And then on top of that, we'll follow up with the hiring manager. All you have to do is show up, approve the ones that you like, and go on the interviews. We think it's just a better process. It allows you to get more tailored jobs, apply to more jobs, and generally have to do a much much less work to get many more responses. We're launching this into early access, as I mentioned, and you can check it out on wellfound.com if you want to get on the wait list. So I just want to say thank you. It's great talking to you guys about how to hire and how to get hired in a remote world and show you some of our products. If you want to learn more, you can always come to wellfound.com and you can reach out to me directly at amit@wellfound.com.